Today we're going to do a backflush of the wetland filter of this system with Taylor Waterscapes. It's been a year since this project was completed and it's going to get its first backflush. So I'd like to explain a few things first. The filtration system, the quite simple filtration but very effective filtration system that we utilise in these projects. Here we have a thing, we call it an intake bay or a gathering area for material. And it's like a larger form of a skimmer. Once a pond gets above a certain size, skimmers aren't effective enough to pull water in and actually to store material. We've done a bit of a hybrid system here, so we have a pump down deep pulling water from below this intake bay. The water's getting pulled in through this narrow opening there. And then we also couple this with an actual pond skimmer. And we normally put this one on a timer. So this would collect any floating material that you can then easily remove by removing the basket, just closing the weir plate like this. Allow the water to drop. That just basically strands all the material in the basket. And then we'll take our basket out once it's dropped. And then any floating material that may have been in there, you'll notice this one has got absolutely nothing. There's really no trees around it, so there's very little material that falls into it. We might get a little bit of algae. In this case we have these finer mats just to maybe just polish the water a little bit. Once we've got that basket clean, we'll put it back into place, and then we open the weir plate and it refloods. And this one, like I said, is based off our connected to our circulation jets, and that's just pushing water through areas just to push any still areas that may exist, especially across beaches. In your beach design, imperative is to put some kind of circulation just to push that water across through that shallow area of the beach to take any heated water back out and any warmer water or nutrient-rich water back out into the water flow, so it can be taken to the wetland. Now all the water from here, we also have a submerged pump which is running the wetland. In this case it's a 20,000 litre pump. Now the wetland is the second. This is probably one of the most important things you can do for a natural pond, if you're having one, is an intake bay area to remove the material. It's not good enough to put a pump just on the bottom, just to suck material up. You really want to get rid of any material before it actually hits the bottom, and the key for this is good water flow through your pond to bring in any floating material, any floating algae, any leaves and things into this intake bay area where it can be removed from the system. Anything that settles to the bottom, if it's not removed, will start breaking down and become part of the nutrient cycle, which we want to maintain a little bit but not overdo it. So in our designs, I like to use the analogy that we're building a section of a very healthy stream, river or lake, I suppose, So we have water moving through the system as it would in a natural body of water, where any nutrient loads or material is taken downstream. You have filtration happening through oxidization and aeration through the rock and pebble coming down through. And so this kind of mimics the bottom end. Our intake bay mimics the moving of water down, further down through the through a creek system, and the incoming area is our wetland area, so our filtration. So really it's creating that section in between which we love to look at and love to swim in, but with these two incredibly important elements that keep it healthy and good water quality. So up here we have our wetland filter. Now this is I suppose, kind of like the kidney of the whole system. Water is flowing up through layers of gravel, and it's really about providing massive amounts of habitat for bacteria, beneficial bacteria, and in this case aerobic bacteria. We're creating aerobic conditions by having the waterfalls, by having movement. We're pulling more aerated water off the surface, because as you go deeper, oftentimes it's less aerated. So we're actually pulling aerated water in, and then we're providing it to a massive colony of bacteria that we've provided the habitat for within the wetland filters. Today we're going to do a backflush, so which is quite a simple process. It's just a matter of draining the wetland, and then we actually put water in at volume. It's not pressure, not with a pressure cleaner. You want kind of like a 40 mil or a 50 mil pipe volume, say 20,000 litres an hour, and you work your way across the top of the stone, pushing water down, dropping water down through those pebble layers so that it reaches the void. There is a constructed void underneath all of this where the material is pulled down into, and then taken to a central pipe, I suppose you'd call it, or construction, where we can take it out with the sump pump. Really simple process, one of the simplest filters to look after, and the fact that you really have to do it at least, you know, no more than every 12 months. 12 to 18 months is kind of like my sort of baseline on when you have to do the backflush. It really would depend on the environmental conditions that your pond is in. So we'll go through the process today of how you do a filter backflush. You have two pumps. This is a pretty simple sump pump. I have another one here. Put it in a bucket so that when you put it into a pond full of pebble, it doesn't suck rocks into it. It's a little tip. So we use one of them, this one here, to pump water from the pond up into the top of the wetland, and this one we're using to drain the wetland and to also suck out the sludge and material as it's being pushed down through washing it. Okay, so we're here in our wetland, and it's the water's slowly reducing. We've turned the pumps off, so the water flow has stopped. You'll notice there's really good growth here, but there's a little bit of string algae in the top of the system still. That'll reduce even further as this thing matures and gets more sun cover over it. And also this is indicated to me that it does need a good wash, because they're actually, and a backflush, because there is still nutrient which is releasing, that has been collected in the wetland filter that now needs to be taken out, and that will actually get rid of all of that nutrient load that is supporting the algae which is on top here, which, as I always say, is just doing its job by removing any excess nutrient from the system. Here we have our snorkel lid. So this is the access into the bottom of a wetland. If you don't have this, or it's undersized, for example, it's using a very small pump, you can't get, or pipe actually down to the bottom, you cannot get a sump pump down in there. So this is it's close to 300 mil pipe, which goes to the deepest point in the wetland. Now this is also connected, in coming into this we have a thing called a centipede, which is a slotted pipe coming down below all of the rock and also below the void that we create in that wetland. And it again is at a deeper spot, so when we backflush, we're backflushing all that material down into the void where our aqua blocks are. It hits that, it disturbs any material that's settled there, and then it pulls it into the central channel, and then down here where we have our sump pump, where we pump it out. So we're going to drop this down into it as such, and we'll be pumping that water out now. Okay, so now we're using that pump to just drop the water in this wetland. It is really key that all the water is taken out of it. And then as we're flushing, which we'll show in a while, that the water level is actually, you can see the waterfall at that pump as it's flowing into it from as you're flushing down the wetland. If you can't see that water actually running down through it, you're not getting the full flush effect out of it. So you can see we've started pulling the water out of the wetland filter. You can see how clear it is actually. It's beautiful, clean water. And that's to be expected because nothing's been disturbed as yet. We're just pulling out clean water out of the filter. So it's not an indication of what we're going to find later, which we'll show you, what actually comes out of this. Now this water could be stored in a tank. It could be put back into the pond if you want to preserve it, so that you could then refill your ponds later with this water, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Beautiful, clean, clear water. And at this point now also we take advantage of the fact that we've dropped the water out of the wetland, or off the surface of the wetland. We'll take some time to prune the plants back a little bit, remove any detritus or debris around the place, and just give it a little pruning, I suppose. It's a good opportunity to do that, take any dead material out and just set it up for the next 12 months growth. So we have here a little freshwater shrimp, really good indicator of good water quality, and one of the reasons why I would never ever use heavy duty algicides in our systems. I just stick with bacterias. Although everything says fish safe and everything, most of the heavy duty algicides or algicides out there will destroy and kill off your crustaceans, which are one of the pivotal I suppose, ingredients in a really healthy ecosystem. So imagine if it's killing off your snails and your crustaceans, and it'll start to even kill off some of your beneficial bacteria as well, your phytoplankton, your zooplankton as well, which is really, really important for a really healthy pond. So I stay away from those. Generally just use the bacteria just to treat and let it go through its process. If you are patient and you realise you're working with a natural ecosystem, you're not going to be wanting to do that anyway. There is a time for everything to grow in, and you need to be able to work with it. Every pond is different and will go through at certain stages. It could take 8 months, it could take 1.5 years for it to finally establish into what it's going to be. But the key is to be patient with it and not just to bomb it with everything you can get from anywhere. Because as soon as you start doing that, you have absolutely no idea what is actually working and what's not, and actually what kind of damage you could be doing to the system and extending the issues as well. So don't be afraid to take your plants or cut your plants back. They are in water, then a bit of pruning or heavy pruning is not going to hurt them. They will always grow back. There's always going to be nutrient and space for them to grow, so we'd like to take this opportunity to prune things back a bit, take any loose material that may be under there, dead material off them. Don't be scared about pruning. The plants will grow back quick. So if you need to conserve water, a good option now, the pump has pumped about half of the water out of the filter. At this point there's enough water, water-free stone, so we can use some of that water before we drain it all, just to wash that top portion of the pond or the wetland down into moving it down through the layers. Saves a bit of water in the process. Now the key with washing down is just moving nice and slowly across the top. And this again with volumes of water, not with pressurised water. You want volume. So it carries any material down through the pebble. You know when it's time to stop this pre-washing down with the same water that's coming out of it, when it starts to change colour a little bit and you start to get a bit more tannins in the water and material in the water. Still right now it's pretty clear, but we'll wait till it starts doing that before we throw the pump or pipe back out into the garden. Now the material that does come out of these wetland filters is perfect for your garden. It's really high in nutrients, so you can just drop it into any planted area really, and it'll be adding a lot of nutrients to your landscape. So it's not to be put down the drain at all, it's to be put back into your landscape. Utilise it. I've been dropping the water out, but I've taken it back to give it a bit of a backflush, just with the same water that's coming out of the bottom of the filter. You can see the water colour's changed, it's gone quite dark. That means it's starting to process or start to moving material through the filter. So we'll drop this out into the garden again and let it drain. So you can see how deep these wetlands are. I mean, the bulk of this area is actually made up of different grades of pebbles, so there's massive surface in here, but we're down a good 1.2 metres. That's where the pump goes down to. We're nearly down there. We want to get that water down below the pump, and you'll see why once we start flushing it. But quite a bit of water to come out in this flush. Again, it's only a 1 year to 18-month process, so in that time you'd be doing more wastage if you were back flushing say a box filter or a pressure filter like every week, for example. This is just once a year or every 18 months. Okay, so the point we want to get, we can see where the pump is exposed, and you can see water actually running into that void down there where the pump's sitting. It's the bottom of the centipede. It actually is the deepest part of the wetland. And that's where you want the water to be, either around there or halfway up the pump. As long as you can see that water running into that chamber there, you're flushing well and you're actually doing it properly. If it fills up too far and you stop that current, you actually inhibit the backflow or the backflush process a little bit. So you can see how filthy that water is. We'll go and have a look at the other side and see what the extent of the material coming out is. And you want to keep doing this until the filter runs clean. And so we have Daniel doing the backflush. We have a pump in the pond. You could also use a water tanker if you're doing it on your first flush. And he's working his way slowly across the top of the pebble with volume, not pressure. And that water's moving down through the pebble, carrying any accumulated debris or silt mostly is what can be in there. It's taking it down, it hits the void, it moves across to the central pipe, and then that runs into our central area or our snorkel area where the pump is taking it out. It's been done, this pond. This is its first wetland flush. Remember how in the initial stage it was a beautiful clear water coming out of the filter, nothing wrong with it. We've got that water drop down now. The backflush has started. You can see the colour of that. There's so much material in that. There's a lot of grain in it as well. So it's quite a little bit of grain material in there, but it's pretty much liquidised as we're backflushing, we're liquidizing and carrying away that build-up of organics in the stone and removing it now. This would have all been within the system. You can imagine this, all this silt, all this material would have still been in a pond system if it did not have this wetland filter that will enable us to take it out of it. Doing it until it starts to run clear. And so that's pretty much the simplicity that's involved in actually cleaning out one of these wetland filters. It's really just a little bit of sweat and time really to do it. But you can, from what we've seen with the material coming out the pipe, how much material does collect in these systems, how effective they are at removing sediment from the water, from a pond, and putting it into an area that you can remove then quite simply. So Daniel's going to keep going with the backflush, moving across the top. Once he's finished, once we've noted that there's actually clear water coming out of that pipe, we'll refill the filter. You can use the water from the pond to do that, or in this case we have a clean tank, storage tank full of water we're going to pump into it, get it up and going, and that's a backflush filter. That's a successful backflush filter, again, designed into these systems, the Aquascape upflow wetland filters, to be made an easy task to actually clean out. So once a year, once every 18 months, back to a beautiful pond.